I was halfway through my third coffee of the day, headphones in, half watching a YouTube tutorial on DIY van conversions when my mom burst into my apartment like she owned the place. She didn't knock. She never did. I guess raising 3 kids gave her the idea that boundaries were optional, even if one of those kids had been living on his own for nearly 4 years. That's me, by the way. Carter, 27 years old, part-time freelance web designer, full-time survivor of a family who thinks life on your own means failure to launch. They don't get me, never have. I wasn't the college golden child like my older brother Matthew, and I sure as heck wasn't the princess bride-to-be like my younger sister, Savannah. I moved out at 23. Not for college, not for a job in some skyscraper, but because I wanted space. Air. I was working retail back then doing odd jobs, pet sitting, helping neighbors with tech stuff, anything that kept me afloat. Eventually, I got into freelancing and building websites for small businesses, and I've been making it work. It's not flashy, but it's mine. I rent a small studio over my friend's garage, converted it myself, and yeah, it's got a sink that clogs every week and a view of a dumpster, but it's home. My home. Mom never approved. You could have just stayed in the guest room and saved money. Right, because staying in the room with floral wallpaper and no door lock, under their roof and their rules, sounded like freedom. Savannah, meanwhile, lived at home until she was 26, just moved in with her fiancé 3 months ago, and still drops off laundry for Mom to wash. But somehow she's the grown-up. I'm the experiment. Anyway, Mom barges in without so much as a "Hey, Carter," and goes straight for the kitchen drawer like she's in her own house. "We need to talk," she says, already sorting through my silverware like she's judging me for having mismatched forks. "Hi to you too," I say, pulling out my earbuds. "Everything okay? We've decided what to do with Grandma's savings." I blinked. My grandmother, Dad's mom, passed 2 years ago. Lovely woman. Sharp as a tack until the very end, and more importantly, she actually got me. She used to slip me $20s just for showing up to Sunday dinners, wink at me when Mom criticized my career choices, and she was the only one who ever visited my apartment more than once without acting like she needed a tetanus shot. When she passed, everyone was shocked to find that in addition to the inheritance split among her kids, she left behind a separate account with a very specific instruction: to go to the first grandchild who builds a life on their own. Not graduates college. Not marries rich. Not moves abroad. Builds a life. On their own. There was some squabbling when the will was read, of course. Savannah said it was vague. Matthew suggested maybe it meant financial independence, and my parents sort of ignored it, probably hoping they could delay long enough that one of the others would qualify. But 2 years passed. Matthew's got a mortgage with Dad as co-signer. Savannah didn't even buy her own car. It was a hand-me-down from Mom. Meanwhile, I've been filing my own taxes, paying rent without help, working gigs to keep the lights on. Not a single cent from anyone. So yeah, I kind of assumed the money was mine. Grandma knew what she meant. Mom turned around holding a chipped mug I got from a thrift store. "We're using it for Savannah's wedding," she said like she was announcing a weather update. I stared at her. "What?" "She and Eric need help with the venue deposit. Your father and I decided it's the best use of the money. It's still staying in the family." I stood up, pulse kicking up behind my ears. That's not what Grandma wanted. She wanted it to help someone start their life, Mom said. Savannah's starting her married life. It makes sense. I couldn't believe I was having this conversation. "Mom, I've been living independently for almost 4 years. Freelancing from a garage doesn't count, Carter. Be serious." And just like that, it felt like I was 16 again, being told my hobbies were a waste of time, that I'd never make it in the real world if I didn't apply myself. "Does Dad know?" I asked, though I already had a feeling. "He agrees with me," she said, avoiding eye contact. "And your sister deserves a beautiful day." I couldn't even respond. I just sat back down slowly, trying not to let the shaking in my hands show. She left after a few more passive-aggressive comments about how I should come by the house more often, and how I shouldn't make this awkward for Savannah. What really messed me up was what happened later that night. I texted my sister. Just a short, simple message. "Hey, heard you're using Grandma's savings for the wedding. Thought we should talk." She replied with a single line. "You weren't doing anything important with your life anyway." No emoji. No LOL. Not even a joking tone. Just that. "You weren't doing anything important with your life anyway." I didn't reply. I didn't sleep that night, either. My head kept going in circles. Every job I worked, every time I'd scraped by on a tight budget, every time I said no to hanging out because I had deadlines to hit. All of it, suddenly dismissed by my own sister like it didn't count. Like I was invisible. The next day, I went to visit my Uncle Dean. He's Grandma's younger son, my dad's brother, and the only other person who always had my back growing up. He was never close with my parents, too eccentric for their taste. He restores classic cars, lives in a modest cabin just outside town, and has this dry sense of humor that hides how observant he really is. I showed up without calling, and he didn't even flinch. "Took you long enough," he said, holding the door open. "Come in. You hurt? Your mom called me this morning," he said. "Wanted to keep me in the loop in case I heard any complaints from you." I sank into his cracked leather couch and just let it all spill out. The conversation with Mom, Savannah's text, the bitterness I couldn't shake. He listened without interrupting, just sipping coffee like it was any other Tuesday. When I finished, he leaned forward and said, "You want to tell them, or should I?" I blinked. "Tell them what?" He reached over to a drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. Yellowed paper, handwritten note on top in Grandma's neat cursive. It was a copy of the second clause of her will. One I'd never seen. One my parents clearly never mentioned. And that's when the wheels started turning. Uncle Dean smiled without humor, set his coffee down, and said, "Might be time to crash a wedding planning dinner, don't you think?" And that's exactly what we did. But what happened next, what Dean revealed, what I said, and how my parents reacted, turned the entire wedding plan upside down. And 2 days later, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Not from Savannah. Not from Mom or Dad. Uncle Dean didn't say much in the car ride over. Just hummed along to a song from the 80s and took slow, steady turns like we had all the time in the world. Meanwhile, I was sitting in the passenger seat, my knee bouncing like it was trying to escape my body. The envelope was in my hand, the one with Grandma's real instructions. The weight of it was heavier than I expected. Not just the paper, the meaning, the secret, the thing that had been kept from me for 2 years while my parents and sister spun their little fairy tale about who deserved what. Savannah's wedding planning dinner was being held at my parents' house. Of course, their backyard had been redone last spring. New stone patio, string lights, some kind of Pinterest-inspired water fountain that never worked quite right. Perfect backdrop for their darling daughter's dream wedding. I hadn't been invited. That part still stung. Even if they thought I'd make things awkward, I was still family. But after the conversation with Mom and the text from Savannah, I guess they figured it was better to pretend I didn't exist, at least until they needed someone to haul chairs or troubleshoot the sound system. Dean pulled up 2 houses down. I got out, palms sweaty. I could already hear laughter drifting over the fences. Glasses clinking. My mom's voice rising above the others. All sing-song and theatrical, like she was narrating a soap opera. I recognized the snort laugh that only came from Savannah when she was a few drinks in. Dean handed me the envelope. "Just wait for the right moment," he said. "Don't blow it on the driveway." I took a deep breath and walked toward the gate. I heard someone say, "Wait till you see the dress." And then I turned the corner and entered the backyard. And just like that, the world went silent. Well, not really. People kept talking. Someone coughed. A kid yelled from the trampoline. But for me, it was like stepping into a room where the air had changed. Everyone saw me. Some froze mid-laugh. Mom's smile flickered. Dad stood slowly, his beer paused halfway to his mouth. Savannah, in a flowing white sundress and a glittery tiara like she thought this was a rehearsal, narrowed her eyes like she couldn't quite place what I was doing there. "Oh," Mom said tightly. "Carter, I didn't think you were." "Invited?" "Yeah, I figured." I glanced around. "But since we're talking about Grandma's money, I thought maybe I should join." That did it. The energy shifted. Dad cleared his throat. "Carter, this really isn't the time." "Actually," Dean said behind me. I hadn't even heard him follow. "This is exactly the time." Savannah rolled her eyes. "You're seriously making this about you? Right now?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. The perfect curls, the Instagram-ready makeup, the way she held her wine glass like she was on reality TV. "You said I wasn't doing anything important with my life?" I said, voice low. She didn't even blink. "You aren't." Mom stepped in fast, voice sugar-sweet. "Carter, sweetheart, we love you. But this bitterness isn't healthy. Your sister is building a new chapter. And I've been building mine for 4 years," I snapped. "Without handouts. Without moving back home every 6 months. Without needing a cosigner for everything. You lived in a garage. Savannah snapped. How is that building a life? Dean whistled low. You want to tell them? Or should I? I nodded. Time to end this charade. I held up the envelope. Turns out Grandma had a backup clause in her will. A real specific one. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Carter, it says the money goes to the first grandchild who builds an independent life? Yes, I said. But it also says if that clause is ignored or tampered with, if the money is redirected by anyone who isn't the executor, it triggers a legal review and possibly a reallocation of the entire estate. Silence. Which means, Dean added, if Carter's share was withheld, and this fund was tampered with, there could be grounds to dispute the inheritance altogether. Dad turned pale. You don't want to do this, son. No, Dad, I said, voice steady now. You didn't want me to do this. Savannah laughed. This cold, high-pitched sound I'd never heard from her before. You're bluffing. Dean handed her a copy of the clause. Ask your lawyer. You're really going to ruin your sister's wedding over a technicality? Mom asked, looking at me like I'd just strangled the family dog. That's when I lost it. Ruin it? You already ruined everything the second you decided I didn't count as family. When Grandma died, I thought maybe you'd finally see me. Really see me. But instead, you treated me like I didn't exist. Again. And now you want to steal something she left for me. Twist her words. And act like I'm the problem. Mom's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Dad looked down. Savannah. Well, she just crossed her arms and glared. I never asked for anything. I said, my voice cracking slightly. Not one favor. Not $1. But you? You've been handing Savannah everything her whole life. And now you're surprised I'm done staying quiet? You always felt sorry for yourself, Savannah muttered. You think being the family martyr makes you better than us? No, I said. I think it means I grew up. Dean clapped once. Phew, that was something. I turned to leave. I didn't want to stay any longer. But before I could step away, something else happened. Something I wasn't prepared for. My cousin Jenny, Savannah's age, from the other side of the family, stood up slowly. Actually, she said, I remember Grandma talking about this. She told me once she hoped Carter got the savings. Said he was the only one who didn't expect things handed to him. A murmur went around the yard. Then another voice, Aunt Laura, Mom's sister, added, she told me the same thing. Savannah's face turned red. This is ridiculous. No, I said quietly. What's ridiculous is how you thought no one would care. And I left. I didn't need to see the fallout. I didn't need to hear Mom's frantic damage control, or Dad trying to minimize everything, or Savannah having a meltdown over people choosing me for once. I just walked back to Dean's car and sat down, the envelope still in my hand. But I wasn't prepared for what came after. 2 days later, my phone exploded. Not from my parents. Not from Savannah. But from other people. People I hadn't talked to in years. Cousins. Family friends. Even a couple of Grandma's old neighbors. Some of them called to apologize. Some called to share their own stories about my parents' favoritism. Some just wanted to say they were proud of me. But there was one call I didn't expect. One that changed everything. The call came just before midnight. I was lying on the pull-out futon in Uncle Dean's spare room, staring at the ceiling fan as it rotated in lazy circles. The events of the last few days had spun even faster. The confrontation, the fallout, the silence. Not a word from my parents. Savannah had blocked me on every platform. The last message I saw before she did was just 3 words. You'll regret this. And maybe I did. At least for a little while. Because that night, after the high wore off, after the adrenaline drained out of my limbs and left behind that dull, hollow feeling, I started to question everything. Not the facts. Those were ironclad. Grandma meant for me to have that money. Dean had proof. But the emotional cost? That was harder to quantify. I'd torched what little goodwill I had with my family. I'd stood up for myself, sure. But when the smoke cleared, I was alone in the wreckage. So when my phone buzzed that night, my first instinct was to ignore it. But I saw the name on the screen and froze. Mrs. Finley. She was Grandma's best friend. Lived 2 doors down from her old house. Quilted on Wednesdays. Baked banana bread like it was a competitive sport. I hadn't spoken to her in months. I answered. Carter, she said, her voice soft but clear. I hope I didn't wake you. No. I was up. I sat up on the futon, the room suddenly feeling colder. I heard what happened, she said. The wedding. The money. Everything. News travels fast. Well, she chuckled sadly. Your mother's not exactly discreet. I rubbed my eyes. Let me guess. She's telling everyone I ambushed the dinner? She's telling people you manipulated Dean into twisting your grandmother's words and threatened the entire inheritance. Her voice sharpened. But I knew your grandmother, and I know exactly what she wanted. I didn't say anything. Carter, she continued, before she passed, your grandmother gave me something. She made me promise to hold on to it until the day someone in the family tried to go against her wishes. She said, and I quote, they'll try. And when they do, give this to Carter. He'll know what to do. I swallowed. What is it? A letter. In her handwriting. Dated 3 months before she died. By the next morning, it was in my hands. The letter was short, barely a page. But every word hit harder than the last. She talked about watching me grow up. About seeing how I never asked for anything. How I found my way even when no one gave me a map. She wrote about her disappointment and how the rest of the family clung to appearances, to status, to the illusion of success. And then came the final paragraph. If you're reading this, it means they've done what I feared, tried to rob you of what I left in good faith. But I know you, Carter. I know your heart. Don't let them break it. Take what is yours, but more importantly, build something better with it. Something they'll never understand. Not out of spite. Out of freedom. That's what this money was always meant to buy. I read that letter 5 times before I folded it back into the envelope. That night, I didn't cry, but I felt something shift. And the next morning, I started over. Not in a dramatic, movie montage way. There were no fast cuts of me suddenly becoming rich or famous. No swelling music. Just small, stubborn steps. I moved back into my tiny apartment above the garage. Uncle Dean offered to let me stay longer, but I needed to be on my own again. Even if it hurt. I called my old clients. Picked up a few web design gigs. One of them referred me to a coffee shop owner looking to build a new site. That guy knew a bakery owner. And so it began. 2 weeks later, I launched my own portfolio site. Clean, simple, functional. I added a blog. Wrote a post called Building Without Permission. It got shared around a few freelance communities. A recruiter for a startup messaged me out of nowhere. We talked. I didn't take the job, but we stayed in touch. I got busier. The kind of busy that fills your calendar but doesn't drain your soul. Meanwhile, the family drama continued, but in the background. Like static. I heard through Dean that the wedding plans had stalled. That my parents were arguing about finances. That Savannah had tried to use the savings account and found it locked pending review from the estate's lawyer. Apparently, the clause Dean brought up wasn't just symbolic. It had legal teeth. The lawyer, Grandma's original estate planner, launched a full audit. He wasn't impressed with what he found. Still, I didn't gloat. I didn't engage. I stayed quiet. Because for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was doing something real. A month passed. Then another. I started waking up before my alarm. Not out of stress, but out of purpose. I walked more. Ate better. I even reconnected with a couple of friends I'd drifted from. People who always asked how I was doing and actually waited for the answer. One of them, Zoe, invited me to a local business networking event. I almost didn't go. Felt like I'd stick out. The guy with no degree and a sketchy family story. But she insisted. I went. And something clicked. I met a guy there named Drew who ran a nonprofit helping small businesses in under-resourced neighborhoods. They needed a better online presence. I offered to help. Not for free, but at a discounted rate. That one decision turned into a partnership. I started designing templates specifically for low-budget clients. Clean, optimized, no fluff. Word spread. Then Zoe said something one night over dinner that stuck with me. You know, she said, sipping her tea. You're kind of becoming what your grandma wanted you to be. I smiled. What? Broke but noble. She laughed. No. Self-made. And dangerous. I raised an eyebrow. Dangerous. To people who only feel powerful when they're holding something over your head. I didn't say anything, but I thought about that all night. Because she was right. The more I built, quietly, without asking for permission, the less power my family had over me. Their silence became irrelevant. Their opinions, empty. And that's when I got the letter. A physical one. Handwritten. In Savannah's flowy cursive. Inside was a single sentence. You should have just let me have it. No greeting. No apology. Just that. It didn't make me angry. It made me done. That was the last straw. Because I realized then, they weren't going to learn. They weren't going to apologize. They weren't even going to acknowledge what they did. And that's when the idea hit me. A way to make it crystal clear, not just to them, but to everyone. What happened next was the moment everything turned. The moment I stepped out of the background and made myself seen. Not for revenge, not out of pettiness, but to take back the story they tried to erase me from. I spent 2 days staring at that note from Savannah. Just that one sentence. You should have just let me have it. It was so brazen, so entitled, so dismissive that it almost made me laugh. Almost. But more than anything, it confirmed something I already suspected deep down. She didn't feel guilty. Not even a little. She genuinely believed she was owed my inheritance, and in her eyes, I was the one who'd committed a betrayal. Not her. Not my parents. Me. That note, that smug little dagger disguised as a sentence, didn't break me. It sharpened me. And with every hour that passed after reading it, something began to click into place. A slow, deliberate resolve I hadn't felt since I first moved out of my parents' house at 23. But this time, I wasn't just leaving. I was planning to dismantle the foundation they built their comfort on. Quietly, thoroughly, and in full view. First, I started with knowledge. I made an appointment with Grandma's estate lawyer, Mr. Whitaker. He was in his early 70s, walked with a limp, and had a gaze that made you sit up straighter. The kind of guy who didn't need to raise his voice to assert dominance. We met at his office downtown, where everything smelled like old books and polished wood. I was wondering when you'd come by, he said, motioning for me to sit. You knew? I drafted that clause with your grandmother. She was very specific. She expected resistance from your parents. Why didn't you say anything sooner? I'm not allowed to interfere unless someone challenges the terms, he said. You challenging it opened the door. And what's the status of the audit? I asked. He pulled a thick file from his drawer. Ongoing. But I can tell you this. Your parents moved the funds prematurely. Without executor approval. They tried to launder it through a secondary account to make it look like it wasn't technically used. Sloppy. Can they get away with it? He shook his head. Not if we push back. We talked for nearly 2 hours. He showed me the full estate distribution. Turns out, there was more than just the savings account. Grandma had also left partial shares in a small commercial property downtown that my parents had quietly sold off the year before. The paperwork listed it as a family-approved liquidation. My signature? Forged. I didn't even get angry. I got focused. When I left that office, I had a plan. Not just to reclaim what was mine, but to make sure the truth saw the light of day. Not just for me, but for Grandma. Step 1. Secure the legal ground. Mr. Whitaker agreed to move forward with a formal dispute, citing breach of will and fraudulent signature. He warned me it could get messy, that families don't like legal battles. But I didn't flinch. If I don't stand up now, I said, they'll keep rewriting the past. Step 2. Gather allies. Over the next few weeks, I quietly reached out to a few cousins, aunts, and uncles who'd reached out after the wedding dinner fiasco. Ginny, especially, my cousin who'd spoken up at the party, was furious when I told her about the forged signature. I knew something was off with that sale, she said. Dad mentioned it, but your mom said it was just housekeeping. I nodded. They were betting on me staying quiet. Ginny wasn't the only one. Turns out, a few other relatives had felt the sting of my parents' manipulation over the years. An uncle who was excluded from a family business venture. A cousin who was promised help with college tuition only to be ghosted when she actually got accepted. My parents didn't burn bridges. They let them rot, and then pretended the water was too high to cross. I didn't ask for revenge. I asked for truth. And people were ready to tell it. Step 3. Document everything. I set up a website, private, password protected. Just a timeline. Dates. Screenshots. Bank statements Dean helped me get. The letter from Grandma. The forged signature comparison. Savannah's note. Each piece was like a puzzle tile, and as I built it out, I saw the bigger picture forming. A legacy being quietly hijacked by people who thought love was transactional and power was a birthright. I didn't publicize it. Not yet. I wasn't reckless. But I made it ready. Step 4. Get close to the flame. This was the part that surprised even me. Zoe, my friend from the networking event, was now helping me manage my growing list of freelance clients. She suggested I do a local workshop, something simple to showcase my skills and build connections. I hesitated at first, but then I saw an opportunity. I booked a venue, and I made sure Savannah's fiancé, Eric, got the invite. See, Eric worked in small business development. He lived for events like these. I didn't know him well, but from what I remembered, he was the kind of guy who smiled a lot and asked polite questions, but never really listened to the answers. Still, he was well-connected, and he'd been trying to push Savannah into more networking, especially since they were trying to launch a wedding lifestyle brand together. Yes, a lifestyle brand, based on their wedding. Ironic, right? The workshop went better than I expected. Packed house, good feedback, a few follow-up meetings. But the part that mattered? Eric came, alone. He approached me afterward, holding a cold coffee and wearing a forced smile. "Carter, man, that was really impressive." "Thanks," I said. "Didn't know you were doing all this." "Savannah mentioned you were freelancing, but didn't say it was, like, legit." I let that hang for a beat. Guess she didn't know either. He cleared his throat. "Listen, I know things have been tense lately. With the family. But, I actually wanted to ask if you'd be open to building a landing page for our wedding site. We're thinking of launching a gift registry/blog." I smiled. "You sure she's okay with that?" He looked away. "She doesn't know I'm asking." I didn't say no. Not yet. Instead, I said, "Send me your branding materials. I'll take a look." Because sometimes, the best way to burn something down isn't to attack it. It's to let them invite you inside with a smile. While I waited for his email, I kept pushing forward. I signed 2 more clients, updated the private site with new details, and even reached out to a family friend who worked in local journalism, not to publish anything, but to ask questions. Casually, off the record, just planting seeds. Savannah's wedding, meanwhile, was still in limbo. The venue deposit had been refunded. The original planner had backed out. Word had spread about family issues, and no one in their circle wanted the headache. Then came the final push. Uncle Dean called me one morning. "You free this weekend?" "Why?" "There's a family barbecue at your parents' house. Last-minute thing. Big guest list." I laughed. "You think they want me there?" "They don't know I'm inviting you. But you need to be there." I hesitated. "Carter," he said, "you're not crashing the party. You're walking into the story they tried to write you out of." I showed up. Wore a clean button-down. Nice jeans. Brought a bottle of wine. Not because I wanted to be polite, but because I wanted to walk in like I belonged there. The backyard was filled with familiar faces, people who looked up in surprise when they saw me, but didn't look away. Mom froze. Dad stiffened. Savannah was on the porch, mid-conversation, holding court like always. When she saw me, her smile dropped. "Seriously," she muttered. "You're really going to do this again?" I just raised my glass. "Nice to see you too." She stormed off. Dean met me near the grill. "Timing's good," he said. "Everyone's here." I nodded. "Then let's give them something to remember." Because what happened next wasn't just a confrontation. It was the setup for something they never saw coming. Something that would shake every assumption, every lie, every carefully curated illusion. The backyard smelled like grilled chicken, citronella candles, and something else simmering under the surface. Tension so thick it clung to the air like humidity. Kids ran around. Adults clustered in gossip circles. Laughter floated over the fence in soft waves. And my parents stood stiff and smiling at the center of it all, pretending everything was fine. Pretending nothing had cracked the perfect family portrait they'd spent years painting. Pretending the son they'd erased wasn't walking straight toward them with a plan that had been forged out of months of quiet rebuilding. I didn't go straight to them. That's not how this was supposed to unfold. Revenge, the good kind, the kind that doesn't require shouting or theatrics, needed precision, timing, patience. So I mingled. People came up to me, some hesitant, some excited. A few whispered, "Good for you, standing up for yourself." Others asked how I'd been, how work was going, how life was treating me. I didn't brag. I didn't posture. I just talked. Calm, collected, which made it all the more satisfying when Mom finally approached, forcing a smile so tight it strained her cheekbones. "Carter," she said, voice honeyed and brittle. "You should have told us you were coming. Dean invited me." She looked over my shoulder at him like she wanted to pull him by the ear. "We didn't know you two were teaming up." "We've always been close," I said simply. Dad joined her, hands shoved in his pockets. "This isn't the time for drama. We're trying to have a pleasant afternoon." "I'm not here to start anything," I said. "I'm here because you invited the whole family. And I'm part of it." Last I checked. Mom inhaled deeply, eyes narrowing just enough that anyone else might have missed it. "Let's not dredge up the past." I smiled. "Funny you say that. Because the past is exactly why I'm here. She froze. That's when Uncle Dean clinked a fork against a glass near the patio table. Hey everyone, he called. Mind gathering for a moment? Carter's got something to share. My parents turned toward him in horror. Savannah, who had been sulking on a lawn chair nearby, snapped upright like someone had yanked a string in her spine. Oh, absolutely not, she said, standing and brushing off her dress. You're not hijacking my barbecue now. Your barbecue? Dean raised an eyebrow. I thought this was a family event. It is, she shot back. Which is why he shouldn't be here doing whatever this is. I stepped forward, raising one hand casually. I'm not here to fight, save. I just want to clear the air. Murmurs spread. The crowd began to shift into a loose circle. People who'd heard whispers wanted clarity. Those who hadn't were curious. And the three people who tried so hard to control the narrative looked like they were slowly backing into a corner. Mom stepped forward. We don't need to do this publicly. I didn't break eye contact. Actually, we do. I took a breath and pulled a stack of folders from my bag. Copies from the estate lawyer, the will clause, the audit overview, the comparison of my real signature versus the forged one, and my grandmother's handwritten letter. Some of you might have heard bits and pieces about the inheritance situation. I began. I want to give you the truth. All of it. Not the version that's been curated. Mom went pale. Dad took half a step forward like he might snatch the papers out of my hand. Savannah crossed her arms and scoffed loudly, trying to maintain her usual dominance. As many of you know, I continued, Grandma left a savings account with a note to the first grandchild who builds a life on their own. That wasn't vague. That wasn't symbolic. It was her intention. A few people nodded. And when that didn't go the way certain people expected, I said, glancing at my parents, they tried to redirect it. Without permission. Without legal authority. Dad snapped. Carter, stop twisting. I held up the printed audit. The estate lawyer is confirming unauthorized account movement. And a second issue, the commercial property that was sold last year? I never approved it. I handed a copy to Aunt Laura. People began passing the documents around slowly. Is this real? Someone asked. Dean answered before I could. Yes. Your sister's signature was forged on the sale documents. The crowd erupted in quiet gasps and whispers. Savannah's eyes widened, then narrowed into slits. This is insane. You're doing this because you're jealous. Because I'm the one getting married. Because you think everything belongs to you. I cut in gently. Even things that don't. Her face reddened. You think you deserve that money more than me? No, I said. Grandma thought I did. I let that sink in. Then I pulled out the final piece, the letter. This is her handwriting, I said, dated 3 months before she passed. She asked that it be given to me if the family ever tried to go against her wishes. I read the last paragraph aloud, the one about not letting them break me, about using the money for freedom, not spite. Savannah's bravado faltered. Dad's jaw clenched. Mom's eyes glistened with something sharp and wounded, not remorse, but embarrassment. Because for the first time in years, the illusion cracked in front of everyone. Then came the moment I'd been planning for. I'm not here to ruin anything, I said. I'm not here to take revenge behind closed doors. Everything I'm doing, legally, financially, is already in motion. The estate lawyer is handling the dispute. The audit is nearly done, and the courts will decide the consequences. The silence after that was deafening. But, I added, I want you all to know something. I'm not fighting for money or attention. I'm fighting because my grandmother trusted me to protect her wishes. And I will. Savannah laughed bitterly, her voice cracking. So what? You want us to apologize? No, I said. I don't want anything from you. I felt the weight lift from my chest as I said it. I'm done asking for a place in this family. I'm done fighting to be seen. You made your choice. And now I'm making mine. I turned slightly, scanning the group. The cousins who'd reached out, the aunts who'd defended me, the uncles who nodded silently. I'm building a life without you. A better one. A freer one. And you don't get to rewrite my story anymore. Mom opened her mouth, but no words came out. Dad looked like he'd swallowed gravel. Savannah's hand trembled as she lowered her wine glass, realizing the pitying eyes around her weren't admiration, but recognition of her entitlement, her cruelty, her downfall. Then I finished it. Just so we're clear, I said, the wedding fund is frozen. The property sale is under investigation. And if the court finds what we expect, everything you took will come back. With penalties. Savannah's face collapsed into something ugly and desperate. You can't do this to me. I shook my head. I'm not doing it to you. You did it to yourself. And that was it. I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I didn't linger. I simply nodded at Dean, said goodbye to the relatives who supported me, and walked out of the backyard that had once felt like enemy territory. I expected yelling, maybe a scene, but behind me, all I heard was silence. That heavy, shame-soaked silence of people who finally see themselves and don't like what's staring back. In the weeks that followed, the fallout came fast. The estate lawyer completed the audit. Everything my parents had redirected, every dollar, every signature, every discrepancy, was documented. Legally, officially, the forged property sale became the biggest issue. Even if they claimed miscommunication, the paper trail didn't lie. The judge ordered the funds returned, penalties added, my portion restored, and the leftover balance placed under strict legal supervision. Savannah's wedding plans collapsed completely. The venue withdrew. The vendors backed out. Eric, to his credit, tried to salvage things, but when he learned the full truth, he called off the engagement quietly 2 weeks later. They lied to me, he said in a short message. And they lied to you. I'm out. My parents tried to contact me after everything resolved. Calls, texts, even a long email blaming stress and grief for their actions. I didn't respond. Not out of anger, but clarity. The line between us had been drawn years ago. I'd just never seen it clearly until now. Uncle Dean, though, he came over the day the court's final decision arrived. We grilled burgers on my tiny balcony, talked about life, and toasted to Grandma, the woman who believed in me long before I believed in myself. You did good, kid, he said, patting my shoulder. I just kept my promise. He smiled. That's why she trusted you with it. Life didn't become perfect overnight, but it did become mine. Steady, quiet, honest, and filled with people who saw me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. And as for my family, the truth settled exactly where it belonged. Because in the end, revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's simply choosing to live better than they ever expected you to, and walking away without ever looking back.